This is Dr. Lisa Marie Bobby, and you're listening to the Love, Happiness, and Success podcast. Do you ever feel like your mind and your body are completely disconnected? Like physically, you're sitting at dinner or taking your morning walk, but your brain is busy with a million unrelated thoughts. Meanwhile, life is happening all around you, and you're not really there. You're missing it. If this is sounding familiar, today's episode is for you. It is all about how to intentionally use your senses to get out of your head, back into your life, and reclaim your happiness. Setting the mood for us today is the one, the only, Brian Eno, the master of ambient sonic journeys. Right now, we are enjoying one of his newer pieces called Reflection. And he has actually all kinds of new stuff. Brian Eno has been making amazing music for 30, 40 years and keeps on going. So you can keep track of what he is up to, his new albums, on his Bandcamp page, which is Brian Eno All Saints. Brian Eno All Saints.bandcamp.com. This piece is Reflection. And, while we're here, I'm also going to give a little plug for the place that I first heard about Brian Eno. I am an enjoyer of ambient music. One of my favorite sensory experiences when I'm working, when I'm thinking, I turn on Hearts of Space. I don't know if you've ever heard of Hearts of Space, but it's actually a ambient music program that probably started in the 80s. They used to play it on NPR late at night. Can't stay up that late anymore, but I do have a monthly subscription to Hearts of Space. And it's an interesting collection. They do world music, they do space music. Certainly, Brian Eno makes a regular appearance, but if you are an ambient music enthusiast, you might want to check that out too. It's Hearts of Space, so it's HOS.com. is the website. Okay, enough about music, although we'll be talking more about music over the course of our conversation today with Gretchen Rubin as we explore her new book, Life in 5 Senses. Gretchen, I'm a huge fan, and I'm so excited that you're sharing your wisdom and insight with our audience today. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to have the chance to talk to you today.
Yeah. Well, I have to tell you, I just finished reading your book early this morning, and I couldn't put it down. I absolutely it was fascinating. I learned so many things, and I figured we could start with this. I mean, you begin the book with the story of a personal epiphany that led to this sensory experimentation. And would you share your story?
Absolutely. I'm so happy to hear that the book resonated with you. And I got the epiphany that led to this book in a very ordinary moment in my life. I had pink eye, which I get from time to time, and usually it goes away on its own, but this was lingering, so I did finally go to the eye doctor. So he checks me out. Yeah, I got pink eye. And then as I was getting ready to leave his office, he said very casually, just like, remember to wear your seatbelt. He said, well, be sure to come in for a checkup on time because as you know, you're at greater risk for losing your vision. And I was like, wait, what? No, I did not know that. And he said, yeah, you're extremely nearsighted. And so you are at greater risk for having a detached retina, and that can affect your vision. So if something starts to go wrong, we want to catch it right away. And as it happened, I had a friend who had recently lost some of his vision to a detached retina. So I understood very well what that meant. And this just startled me deeply. And, of course, intellectually, I knew that, at any minute, anything can happen. And I also knew that even if I did lose my vision, I could still have a happy and meaningful and fulfilled life. But it just for some reason really penetrated to me, that I was taking everything for granted, that I wasn't paying any attention to my senses. So I'm walking home. I live within walking distance of my eye doctor. So I live in New York City. So I'm walking home, and all of a sudden, it is as if some invisible knob in my brain has just been shot up to 11. Everything, all my senses seem to just go into this kind of psychedelic hyperdrive where I was seeing everything, hearing everything, smelling everything. I could feel the air in my face and the sidewalk under my feet. And it was all just so intense and overwhelming. And it just made me realize, I was stuck in my head. I was living in a fog. I was stuck behind screens or just kind of in my own thoughts. And I was taking so much for granted. And I was not, I was disconnected from the world and from other people and from myself. And so that walk home made me realize that, first of all, I had been taking everything for granted. And that, second of all, the way that I could reconnect with the world was through my five senses because of just the beautiful intensity that I had experienced, made me realize that I wanted to capture that in my everyday life.
Yeah. Gosh, when I read that and just hearing the story now, like I can so relate, and I think so many of our listeners right now can. I mean, when you were talking about, I think we're probably cut from the same cloth a little bit, Gretchen. You talk about spending a lot of time reading, but I
Yeah.
read constantly, but reading, writing, talking to people, how you were like would be with your family or whatever, and rewriting a paragraph in your
Yes.
head, and I was like, oh my gosh, I totally do that. But it's so poignant because you talk about this awareness where you just realize that you're missing the moment that you're in because of that like internal focus, that preoccupation, and this recognition of what a loss it was in some ways.
No, absolutely. That's exactly what it was. It's just this just not paying attention. Just
Yeah.
not paying attention to what was happening right in front of me, right under my nose, right under my fingertips, and wanting to really experience that, to really feel a direct contact with the world.
Yeah. Well, and this led to some very interesting experimentation, which I want to certainly talk more about. But I'm also just curious to know. I mean, because you've spent so much energy and thought and research into happiness and the ingredients that kind of lead to a happy life, a happy experience. And that's why I'm such a huge fan of your work because it's so empowering. It's really, my understanding is all around what is within our control, to create happiness. And I'm wondering if it was due to some of this research or awareness that you've gained over the years through your, books or the Happiness Project that you like realized that the sensory experience that you were taking for granted was important and connected to your happiness somehow.
No, absolutely. I am the street scientist, and I am my own guinea pig, and I, for more than a decade, I've been sort of researching and writing and thinking and talking to people about how to be happier. And I am sort of the Ben Franklin of happiness, where I want everything to be very practical and very concrete and really like something that I can do. So I never think about things like dopamine because I'm like, well, I can't control my dopamine, but I can make my bed, that kind of thing. And so I do think a lot about it, and I think that I just had this, one of my first exercises myself was to look for what was overlooked. And this was exactly as you say, one thing that I was overlooking, I think, in my study of happiness was the power of my five senses. I thought a lot about the body because I was very well aware of the fact that our physical experience colors our emotional experience. So I thought a lot about things like being outside for morning light, getting enough sleep, things like that, thinking about my body as a source of sort of energy and just the weather of my life. But I hadn't thought about it so much like in terms of sort of sensory experiences. And so this was just a way to take that study of the body in a much deeper way and a much more sophisticated way of understanding the physical experience. Not just like, oh, you need to get enough sleep, but like, oh, you need to turn off the notification sounds on your phone because that's draining. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I got it. Like, and I understand that, you sort of doing different physical things as hacks almost to make yourself feel differently rather than kind of just coming into the sensory experiences themselves and using them for what they are and can be, which is a real connection to a lot of powerful experiences. Um, and I just loved the way that you described this sort of new awareness that you had. I think a quote here of you said, I'd been treating my body like the car. My brain was driving around town, but my body wasn't a vehicle of my soul to be overlooked when it wasn't breaking down. My body, through my senses, was my essential connection to the world and to other people. And like, how easy it is to forget that.
I mean, you think, how could you forget it? What is more vivid? What is more intense? What's more present? And yet it's just very easy to take it for granted and not realize that. One of the things that really surprised me about this was like how little I knew my own preferences, because you would think, well, obviously you'll know if you like this tea better than that tea, or this variety of olive better than that variety of olive, or like this is the way you like to listen to music. But what I realized is that I didn't pay any attention whatsoever. I just wasn't tuned in enough to even notice things. I had a pair of yoga pants that I'd had for like 5 years, and my mother's like, "Oh, it's nice that they're navy blue instead of black." I was like, "Oh my gosh, I never noticed they're navy blue." Like, I literally, how did I not notice that? Um, and yet I was just so absentmindedly going through the world that I didn't even notice things about um my own experience of just even very simple things.
And again, I really want to talk about this journey you then went on. But I am curious about one thing. So, like I can totally relate to what you're talking about. I am a thinker. I'm often, internal processor. Do you think that this experience of being very internally focused and not noticing how things taste or what color things are is more true for some people than it is for others? Like, I'm wondering if introverts tend to be more vulnerable to this, or people who tend to be internal processors versus are some people kind of generally more externally oriented in the world? Or do you think this is really just a common vulnerability for everybody? Like if we're not intentionally trying to connect with our senses, we just won't as a
No,
rule.
I think there's a huge range. And I think
Mm.
some people might be very focused on certain kinds of things. Like you might have a foodie who's extremely focused on, on flavor distinctions and maybe to a lesser extent smell, because it's all wrapped up in that taste, or, a musician who's very, very, very focused on the sense of hearing. Then there might be people who are just really tuned into their senses generally, just kind of like really, really good at noticing. And I'm not sure that it would be introverted or extroverted, because I can imagine extroverted people saying like, well, I'm just so busy talking to people and engaging with people that I don't, like, I'm just shoveling anything into my mouth. I don't notice what room I'm in. I could be, I know people where they can sit at a desk for 7 hours and not even notice it because they get so caught up in something. So I'm not sure. I don't know what it would correlate with, but I definitely think that there's a very big range, in terms of how much people appreciate their senses, how many of their five senses they appreciate, how neglected their neglected senses are, and how many of their senses they neglect. I mean, back to this thing about preferences, it's very funny because I mean, again, like, how did I not notice? When I started this, I was like, okay, well, which are my most appreciated senses and which are my most neglected senses? And I thought of touch as being one of my most neglected senses. But when I started thinking about it and pushing myself to think about touch and talking to other people, I realized actually I'm very, very focused on touch. I'm really kind of a connoisseur of touch. I have a friend, and like we spent an hour talking about silky and slick and being in water versus not being in water and all these things related to touch, and everybody around us is like, what are you people talking about? I didn't even know that about myself. I just had never paid attention to realize how important it was. I looked at my closet, I'm thinking, oh, the reason that I don't wear all these shirts is because I don't like the feeling of cotton. like a cotton shirt. I don't like that feeling. And I had 4 cotton shirts because I had never noticed that before. But I think there are other people who are much more attuned to that, whether in all their senses or maybe just in a handful. I think there's a big, big range. But I think for just about everyone, there are things to do to that up. And then there might be, a few super performers out there from whom the rest of us can learn, who are really, really good at appreciating all their 5 senses. And yeah, they can lead the way.
Wow, that's such a cool idea. And honestly, I had never thought about that before for myself either until I read what you had written about your own recognition that you are more oriented towards certain senses than others, and how that is fairly common. You know, that we all have kind of a primacy around one or two, and it was just not ever a concept to me. But then I was like, that is totally true. And how we pay attention more, I think, to some aspects of our experience than others. So thank you for that. I am going to be continuing to explore. But let's talk about your exploration. So when you made this awareness, you're like, wow, I am not really in the world. A lot of times you set out to change this, and it took you through so many interesting experiences and practices. Can you share with our listeners just a little bit about what you did?
Yeah. Well, there were sort of different categories of things that I tried. So
Hmm.
one is one thing I realized is that the more we know, the more we notice, and that if I knew more, I would appreciate more. So part of it was just learning about the 5 senses, which was just sort of on a scientific level, and that was fascinating. But then I also took a couple courses. Like I went to Flavor University and learned a lot about the way things about flavor. I took 2 courses in perfume. I learned a lot about perfume and the sense of smell and the sense of, and kind of how fragrances are built. Um, and then sometimes I would indulge in a splurge, like a modest splurge, where I would buy something because it delighted my sense. So, like I bought a sense of like really great markers, colored markers, because I thought, oh, they're just like it's a way to play with color. It's a way to hold color in your hands, and then and then one of the most ambitious exercises that I did was I decided I live within, I'm very, very, very fortunate. I live within walking distance of the Metropolitan Museum here in New York City. And I thought, I'm going to go to the Metropolitan Museum every single day that it's open. So for a year, I wanted to do it for a year, but basically I have not stopped since that year's now been over for a while. If I'm in town and the Met is open, I will go. And I wanted to see how an experience of my senses would change over time. So I go to the Met and I think about what I'm seeing there, but also what I'm hearing, smelling, tasting, and touching. Because there are cafes in the Met, so you can taste things there. Don't lick a painting, but you can have a cup of coffee. Um, and I wanted to see how that experience changed over time. What would it be like to visit the Met if I went every single day? And it changed dramatically. And so by setting myself these exercises, it really helped me to dial into the senses. And then some of them were creative exercises that allowed me to tap into my senses, but in a way that unleashed creativity, like writing a 5 senses portrait of my husband, or making an album of now, where I took photographs of everything about my present. Because I don't know about you, but when you think about the past, aren't you more interested in like, what did my bedroom look like when I was 10 years old? Or what did the kitchen look like in my first house, rather than what did the Eiffel Tower look like when we went to France that time? I mean, it's just the ordinary is it's so easy to overlook the ordinary. And so I made an album of now. So those were creative exercises. And then I did many things that were meant to make me draw closer to the people in my life, because one of the most important things that we can do through the senses is to connect with other people. So I did dining in the dark with my husband and my daughter. I took my mother-in-law on a taste tour of the Lower East Side, because she grew up eating sort of traditional Jewish foods, and that's the place in New York City where they're famous for their traditional Jewish foods. So I went on a tour with her, and she told me about what she remembered about growing up, and that really made me much closer to my mother-in-law. I wrote a taste timeline about my own, like all the tastes of my past. And then I called my sister and we just laughed about everything we ate as kids, what we ate at our grandparents' house, all that stuff. So yeah, I set myself just bunch of different sorts of exercises, trying to, um, take all these different approaches to enlivening the senses in my life.
Yeah. Gosh, I mean, just in reading your descriptions of that, first of all, it sounds like you had a fantastic time doing it, which I think
Oh my
made it
gosh.
part of so fun to read.
Oh, it was
Um,
such a
but
joy to write this book. Such a joy.
oh, and yeah, but I bet to have the experiences I don't know, it was just a lot of fun. Um, but can you also say a little bit more about what you noticed that was changing and transforming in terms of your own experience because of these exercises and really trying to cultivate your senses in this intentional way?
Well, it changed me so much. I mean, one of the ways that it changed me was, one of my main principles in life is I want to accept myself and expect more from myself. And that can be hard to know. Like, when are you accepting yourself and when should you expect more from yourself? And there were ways in which, like, one thing that had always sort of dissatisfied me about myself is that I didn't love music the way other people did. Like, people listen to music all the time. They're always listening to new music. They're going to concerts. They play instruments. They read music reviews. They're just very engaged in music. And of course, music is this universal human cultural tradition. All human cultures have music, which is kind of funny because from an evolutionary standpoint, there's not agreement about exactly why people want music so much and love music so much, but it's certainly true. And yet this was something where I'm like, yeah, I'm just not so into music. It was kind of, and I always thought, well, maybe if I just studied harder, maybe I should take a class or like listen to the Great American Songbook or like force myself. I tried to learn to play the ukulele a couple of years ago, and then, but really, I was talking to a friend of mine who knows a lot about music, and he was like, Gretchen, you do love music, but in your own way. And that made me stop and think for the first time, like, well, what is my way? Because when he said that, I was like, well, it's absolutely true that there are certain songs that I love deeply. They give me a very, very powerful reaction that I've listened to hundreds of times, that I still cry every time I hear them or whatever. So it wasn't like I just was unmoved by music, but and I realized, like, I like music in a way that's different from the way that many people like music. I like a song and other people like music. So I might love a song by a particular artist, but it doesn't make me want to go listen to more songs by that artist or go to a concert from that artist or like listen to all the music in that genre. And I won't listen to a bunch of new music just for fun. I just want to hear the songs that I already love. And but I can enjoy it in that way. And once I was sort of like, well, I have my own way of loving music. That sort of allowed me to own that identity and think, well, I'm a song lover, not a music lover, and that my way is right for me, just as your way might be right for you. There's nothing wrong about my approach. There's nothing that needs to be fixed. But once I recognized that, I was like, okay, well, given that that's true, what can I do to develop my love of music in that way? And so I was able to tap much more effectively into the way I love music, because instead of having this sort of vague preconception of what I ought to be doing, I was really like, well, given what's true about me, how do I do it? So I learned a lot about myself and sort of how to engage with what's true for me. Or like I mentioned, touch. It's like now I'm like, wow, I love to peel hard boiled eggs. That's one of my favorite kitchen chores, rather than sort of not even noticing because I was realizing what was true for me. And then and this was related to something else that really surprised me, which is the degree to which we all live in our own sensory worlds. My world is
Yeah.
not your world. Even if we're in the
Fascinating.
same room, we're experiencing something different. And the way that changed me is, first of all, it makes me much more empathetic for people who are saying like, "This doesn't work for me. This is too much. This is draining. This is overwhelming." Like, now I understand. Just because it's fine for me doesn't mean it's fine for them. I can't make any assumptions about that. And also to understand that people really do have different experiences, and we can all learn from that. But we should be very aware of that. And it's funny because I guess I intellectually knew that we weren't all experiencing the same sensations, but it surprised me over and over when you have a podcast. Okay, tell me if you've experienced this. I was doing an interview, a podcast interview, and all of a sudden the interviewer said, "Oh, stop, let's wait." And I was like, "Why are we stopping?" And she said, "Don't you hear the siren?" And then all of a sudden I'm like, "Ooh, yeah, I hear the siren. I live in New York City. My brain doesn't tell me about a siren. I don't need to know that." So my brain brings that way down. But to her, as the podcast recorder, she was very, very aware of all those sounds because that's what her brain was alerting her to. And then she said, "But in Los Angeles, people don't hear helicopters because they hear helicopters all the time. Whereas in New York City, we don't have helicopters fly overhead very much. I'm much more aware of helicopters." So, different sensory worlds.
Definitely. No, and yeah, I mean, it's interesting the degree to which we can notice different things. And
Yeah,
I was actually thinking about that a lot as I was reading your book. And you provided these really interesting, concrete examples. And I had an early personal experience with this. Was a biology major. And no, actually, this was actually in high school. I was in such a nerd, card carrying my whole life. I was in AP biology in high school, and I had this really funny science teacher, and she wanted to demonstrate this. And so it was may have even been one of the taste experiments that you described having, where there was a substance, like I think dipped in litmus paper. That's the way it was presented in my science class, and I think it was like related to one of the compounds that are in broccoli or something, and that different people in this class would taste this paper, and some of them would have this like reaction, and I was like basically just chewing on a piece of paper, like what's going on, because I literally did not taste the same thing that they tasted. And you provided a number of examples of that in your book, with taste, also with smell.
yeah. No, what you're talking about is whether some people are super tasters and they actually will taste more. And it's funny because you might think a super taster would actually love food and be a big foodie, but it's actually often negative because, like, you might eat and enjoy broccoli, but to somebody who's a super taster, they are tasting so much more bitter that to them it doesn't taste good. I have a friend who doesn't like anything sweet. He's like, it's just too sweet. He can't bear anything like birthday cake. And exactly. So we're putting the same substance in our mouths, but we're tasting something very, very different. And then, of course, it's also affected by our culture and our upbringing. Our preferences are affected by the things that we're used to eating even before we're born. There's all this fascinating research showing that, like, if a mother eats carrots before the baby is born, when the baby is born, they will show a preference for things that have a carrot flavor. So we're being inundated with sensory information even before we come into the world. And these things will affect the way we experience sensation.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought that was such an important point with many implications, because so by trade, I'm actually a marriage and family therapist,
Sure.
and I can't even tell you how many arguments I have attempted to mediate where two people are having very different experiences of the same reality. And I
Yes,
think that
sure.
we can say, no, this objectively happened. I saw it, I heard it, I tasted it, and really not understand that literally, physically, somebody else is having a different experience, and that the things that we sort of feel to be true in concrete ways are very much subjective. Like our experiences are unique. And I think that there's a certain almost humility that comes with that, like an allowing of other people's experience to be true and their own. I don't know, just reading about this in your book, it made me think of it a different way, because I think it can somehow be easier to discuss differences of thought, diversity of thought, as opposed to somebody's experience of physical reality. But that's really very different too.
And one way that this comes up with is, I think a lot of times people are trying to argue who's right and who's wrong instead of
Yeah.
saying it's a matter of preference. So, like,
Mm.
if my husband is like, "Well, I like to have music playing when I'm home, so I'm going to turn on the music." And I'm like, "I don't like having music playing because I don't like having background noise." And he might show me research showing, "Oh, If you listen to background music, I'm just making this up. There's probably research about this. Yeah, oh, it makes boost creativity. It's energy. It's this. It's that. And then I'm like, okay, here's my research paper that says no, it's this, that, the other thing. It's like, it's sort of like, well, you have one preference and I have another preference. So then it's a matter of like, well, how do we live together comfortably in the same space rather than trying to argue about who's right and who's wrong? Because there is no right or wrong. For some people, they love having music playing all the time, and for me, I will walk in and without even noticing that I'm doing it, I will start to turn off things that make noise. I don't like having background noise. But people get into a lot of arguments about that for sure.
Well, but I was also so struck by how your journey into sensory experience really strengthened your relationships. And I remember there was one point that I just thought was so poignant. And you were talking about how you're being in the present moment, like literally looking at your husband, which is so easy to not do. I mean, I've been married
Yes.
for a long time. Like, I don't know who is that guy, right? But just really like being in the moment with him, seeing him, hearing him, smelling him, and that this thought came to you, which was, the day may come when I'll think I would give anything to look at him again, the way that I'm looking at him right now, and just this recognition that our time here is short and that these small moments that we're taking for granted are all so precious that I think can only be really appreciated if you have lost someone who was precious to you.
It's funny how it's part of human nature where it's very easy to take things for granted, and it's often when we're faced with loss that we appreciate. And I think one thing to do is like, are there ways that you can try to encourage or discipline yourself to appreciate something before you've lost it and not wait until that moment comes? And so I think that's what happened to me is that sort of the shock of awareness that I could lose something very precious to me made me realize like I don't want to waste another minute. And certainly with my husband, what's ordinary is the easiest to overlook. And I think I just, I see him all the time. So why would I look at him? But then when I started really looking at him, I noticed a lot of things that I hadn't seen before. And so I do think it's really valuable to remind ourselves to see what's happening right in front of our eyes.
Yeah. Well, and the relationship between your senses and your memory and
Hmm.
life experiences. I thought that was fascinating.
Well, I'm a person who doesn't remember things well. Some people have
Me
just sort of
neither.
an encyclopedic memory of everything, and I feel like I don't remember things nearly as well as I wish I did. And so I'm always looking for like ways to dredge up memories or hang on to memories. I'm constantly trying to figure out what are the things that I can do to help myself have a richer sense of memory. And what I found is that the senses, they really powerfully help us connect with the past. And what is really fun about it is there's a lot of memories that I had that were right there. They were right there when I reached for them. But you don't reach for that particular index card. You're not thinking about, well, what did the locker room of my gym smell like when I was in 5th grade? And then when you start thinking back, you're like, "Oh, I absolutely remember that," and it all comes flooding back. And so it really was very exciting that by, like, constantly stimulating my 5 senses and tuning into them, I was able to connect with a lot of memories that I had forgot that I remembered. Because, and we've all experienced that, I think, especially with smell, there's sometimes, like, a shock of a memory coming back, like, you walk by a construction site and all of a sudden you think about summer camp and it's very exciting and out of nowhere because you didn't expect that to happen. But all of our senses. One of the things that I did that I really loved was it somehow occurred to me because I was thinking about my grandparents' house. Both my grandparents have died many years ago, so I haven't been in their house in a long time. And then somehow it occurred to me, well, their house sold. Maybe there are pictures online from when the house was for sale. And I went online and Google Maps, I could look at the outside of the house, and there it was just like I remembered. So fun to see it, and the petunias were still in the flower box, the way my grandmother always had them, and then there were actually pictures on the inside, and it was empty. Of course, their furniture was gone, but just walking through those rooms, the picture of those rooms. And I was like, oh, I forgot about the knobs on the drawers had kind of this Western feel to them that I loved as a child. I completely forgot about that. But the minute I saw them, I absolutely remembered them. And I remembered how I thought, how I'd responded to them like as a 7-year-old. It all came right back. And so it is exciting to feel this connection to memories and to the past. And of course, it reminded me of my grandparents, of like seeing the patio reminded me of my grandfather and how he would grill hot dogs and how he got food poisoning one time and the joke would always make. It all came right back. It was all there. I just had to find a way to retrieve it.
Yeah. Wow. Gretchen, as you're talking, I'm being flooded with memories
Good.
right now of like
Good. Of what? Of what?
it's amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, so I am a proud first generation Belgian American. I eat a
Mm.
lot of mayonnaise anyway, but my grandmother in her house, she had these, it was an old house with these like crystal, they weren't
Oh,
glass. Well, maybe they were glass actually. It was old enough, but like the crystal doorknobs and like just seeing the radiator and like
yes.
late. Oh my gosh. But but it's so crazy because like I am plagued with the same affliction. And I think it's probably because I frequently am preoccupied. I'm thinking
Yes.
about things like, what am I going to
Yes.
talk to Gretchen Rubin about tomorrow? Like that whole
Yes.
thing.
Yes.
And
Yes.
what we know is that, the way that your brain encodes both short and long term memory requires you to be absorbing sensory information to create a memory in the first place. And just when you were talking about like your childhood memories, I too have such clear memory. Not that I've thought about them for a while, but it's like, being 4 years old and being much more like in the physical world in some ways than I feel now. It's like little children are sensory creatures. Do you know what I mean? And like the
Mhm.
the the
Mhm.
power of those early memories. I just wonder if there's a connection there.
Mhm. Well, and there's something called the reminiscence bump, which is that and I'm trying to remember what the age is. I think it's 15 to 23 is the period in our lives that people tend to remember the best. So there are, periods of our lives where we actually do tend to remember things more clearly. And I think you're right. There's the sensations of childhood. If you think of something like paste, like the glue that's in the paste form instead of the liquid form, that always like, I could just even conjure it up in my mind and it takes me back. But one of the things that was fun about doing like the taste timeline, and obviously you could do this with smell or hearing or any of your senses, you could do a timeline where you think about what are the associations with that time. That really does help bring that time back. It's sort of a way to allow your mind to search through memories in a way that's very vivid. There's this wonderful website called the Nostalgia Machine that listeners might like to check out. And what it does is it's organized by year and it has what the top songs were for that year. So you could just click on it and listen to, the song. And so if you could pick the year you graduated from high school or like the year you got married or whatever year is important to you and just listen to a bunch of the songs. And it's hilarious how much you're right back in the car with your friends or whatever you were doing at the time because those songs and I think people are aware that a song is often very closely associated with memory. So we really can tap into all these, but maybe one person only uses hearing, but then it's like, oh, well, let me think about taste and how I could use that to bring back memories. So, and it's pretty, what I like about a lot of these exercises is you have to think, but then you can create the timeline or like a five senses portrait of someone else. It's not that hard to actually do, and you feel really excited by the process, but you're not writing page after page after page or creating something that's arduous in itself. It feels creative and productive, but it's not onerous.
Yeah, that could be fun. Well, so there's I think a lot of value what you're describing in using your senses to almost have like an anchor to previous chapters of life and previous memories. Because as a therapist, there are limits to how much time it is useful to spend in the past. I think it's also helpful to be in our present and to be thinking about our future. And I think to really understand ourselves and gain insight into the experiences that shaped us is very important just in developing self awareness and also self compassion. And I love you know what you're saying about using your five senses deliberately to help make that practice of understanding yourself and kind of connecting the dots of your own life experience more powerful in some ways. It's really helpful.
Yeah, I think that knowing ourselves is so you think, "What's easier than knowing myself? I just hang out with myself all day long," and yet it's one of the great challenges of our lives is to know ourselves and to have perspective on ourselves. So I think, yeah, thinking about the senses was a really interesting way to try to gain insight into my own nature.
Yeah. For sure. Well, and there were so many interesting things in your book. I felt like I was being kind of lobbed with thought bombs, Gretchen. There were just so many things that either I didn't know or I had never thought of before. Like the fact that Andy Warhol intentionally wore a specific perfume for a few months and then stopped in order to capture the memories of this specific moment in his life.
Yeah, isn't
Fascinating.
that fascinating?
Yeah.
I am very preoccupied with Andy Warhol's writing. I don't really like his visual art very much, but he was the most extraordinary thinker. So I've read so many of his interviews and his writings, and in fact, he has a quotation that is the epigraph to the book, which is, "Nobody really looks at anything. It's too hard." And I've thought about that so many times. But he was very intentional in how he used his senses. He was buried. The story is that he was buried with a bottle of perfume. Yeah, so he had a extraordinary relationship to all his senses.
I wonder which perfume he chose to be buried with.
Well, I think I should know that. Do you want me to take a second? I think I could look that up. Hang
Oh,
on. Where
no,
would
well,
that
I was
where would
thinking like what layer of his life was ultimately the most important to him? Would there be a clue
mm,
to that would be connected to that scent?
oh,
Sorry, I'm
kind
like
of a
pathologically curious. I can't stop myself.
kind of a rosebud. What was his
Hmm.
rosebud? No, I think, I'm not
Yeah.
sure, it may be an apocryphal story, but, I think that's actually knowable what was allegedly buried with him, but I do not remember the name of the perfume.
Hmm. Okay. Wow. Research project. Okay.
Mhm.
Well, but I also love how you talk in your book about some really just practical strategies that I think we could all use to more intentionally develop our senses. One of the ones you described that I think I am putting into practice starting today was this idea of a sensory journal.
Mhm.
Can you tell us a little bit about that practice and what it did for you?
Well, it goes back to this idea that you were talking about before about being preoccupied and not appreciating the moment and having it happen without really being intentional about what we're experiencing. So I started a five senses journal. So each day it's, seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching. And I would just write down one remarkable moment. So it could be good, it could be bad, just something I noticed. So, like, I was downtown here in New York City and church bells rang out. And I was like, that's interesting. I didn't know there was a place in New York City where, like, the hour rang with church bells. So that was hearing. And what it did is it helped me pay attention because I was always sort of like on the lookout for like what's sort of a noticeable or remarkable sensation that I'm experiencing. But also, what it really turned into is a kind of gratitude journal. And I have tried to keep gratitude journals in the past, and like all the happiness experts, recommend this. And it's absolutely true that gratitude is an essential element of a happy life. I absolutely believe that. But keeping gratitude journals had always kind of bugged me. I did not find that to be a useful strategy. But this I liked, and it really turned into a gratitude journal. It's gratitude for the world around us, for nature, for creations, like a wonderful perfume. And it really enlivened things. And it's fun kind of as a journal too, because you flip back and you're like, oh, well, when I was on vacation, I was having this extremely different sensory experience, or oh, it's fun to see, 6 months ago it was 50 degrees hotter than it is today because we were in a totally different season, or whatever it is. It's just an interesting way to record the experience of life.
Yeah. But I was thinking about that too, because to notice really is to appreciate, and that
Mhm.
there are just so many things that it is easy to not notice or appreciate. And I think that's what struck me the most about this idea of the sensory journal, is that it's really cultivating an appreciation and a gratitude for the very mundane things that you would otherwise not
Yes.
notice. And just this recognition that all of our lives are, in fact, like overflowing with these things that are,
Yeah, absolutely. Because you might think, "Oh, I'm gonna go to this wonderful famous restaurant, and so I'm gonna really, really pay attention to my senses, and maybe I'll write in my journal about what I experienced." But really, I think these kind of peak experiences are sort of like, and I almost touristy experiences where you're sort of there for a visit, but it's not where you live. In the end, I think that they're less meaningful than just sort of the ordinary experiences. The elevation of the ordinary day and the ordinary experience, to me, in the end, is more interesting and more rich, which is, what do I see in a shop window when I pass by? And how do I look at that the way I would look at something in the Metropolitan Museum?
yeah. Well, the connection to art in some ways, as you're talking, I was thinking about like the work of some photographers that I appreciate the most. And I think it is their ability to help us see this beauty in these moments. The thinking like Saul Leiter, just
Mhm.
capturing the way light is kind of shining on the ground
Yes.
after a rainstorm and how beautiful
Mhm.
it is. But that
Yes.
those are exactly the moments that are accessible to us if we,
Yes.
just turn that on intentionally.
Yes. It's all right there. Yes.
Yeah. And just a couple more things I wanted to get your perspective on. So, one of the things too that I was thinking about as I was reading your book, and this is my, putting my therapist hat on here. I often talk to many people who struggle with anxiety, and I think that's just such a common experience. But anxiety is many ways really being preoccupied with potential problems in the future. Your mind is going out into the future to think about what could happen, or maybe going into the past, worried about what did happen. But it's really the opposite of being present and connected to your physical reality. And I was wondering if you experienced any of that in yourself through this experiment. I mean, I don't know if you're personally prone to anxiety. I know I am. But did you feel like it helped with your inner experience of just wellness or calm or inner peace when you were more connected to the world?
Absolutely, and I think that's true of all the senses. The one that was really interesting to me was the sense of touch, and I think there's a lot of awareness now of how touch can help with anxiety, whether that's like using a fidget spinner or a pop toy or therapy dough, things like that that are sort of specifically for anxiety, restlessness, focus. Those are very nice to use. Also, just human touch, appropriate human touch itself is calming. This is why getting a hug from somebody that you love calms you down, or like if you're feeling upset, pulling a dog onto your lap and petting their fur is very calming. One of the things that surprised me is, so I had read this, celebrity memoir by Andrew McCarthy, and he was describing how when he had to do a really big scene, he was very nervous about his whether he would be able to perform at that level. And at the last minute, he added a set of bongos and he played the bongos during the scene. And he was talking about how having a prop helped to unleash the performance that he wanted because it grounded him and sort of gave him a focus. And it's funny because I started asking around, and this is something that many people do in ordinary life. They have a prop. So I realized, and this was something that I had done to manage anxiety, but without even consciously knowing it. I only realized it kind of looking back, is that I hold a pen in my hand. And maybe you're the same. We sound like we are cut from the same cloth. I find myself holding a pen in situations where there's no need for me to hold a pen. I don't even have any paper. Why am I holding a pen? I'm at a cocktail party, where I'm like behind a stage getting ready to give a big talk, and I'll have a pen in my hand. Even that, it just makes me feel grounded. It makes me feel calmer to have a pen in my hand. And then I've talked to people where like teachers, when they're teaching, will hold on to like a mug of coffee, or somebody will hold on to a clipboard. Or I was talking to a photographer who had to take photos of people in the wine industry, and often they were very uneasy about having their pictures taken. So he'd give them a wine glass or a wine bottle or a basket or whatever would be appropriate. And he said that helped them like calm down and like have their picture taken. Somebody else was saying that when she felt like people were going to be looking at her, like if she had to present, she would get very hot and sort of feel like she was floating outside of her body. So she would hold a water bottle filled with ice water. And that made her feel very grounded and kind of in her body. And I think it's just that having something in our hands, even if it's not something explicitly like this is meant to relieve anxiety, like a fidget toy, even something, sort of an ordinary prop can be helpful. Holding onto like a stone or, there's something about hanging on to something. I think this might be one reason that people don't let go of their phones. I think for some people, they just like having it in their
Security
hand.
object.
Yeah, it's a comfort object. And it's not even so much that it is the phone, but it's a familiar object that's kind of the right weight. You hold it in your hand, and it just makes you feel more grounded to have it. And so it's nice to know about something like this because then you can think about using it consciously as a tool. So now that I know this about a pen, I always make sure that I have a pen. I don't sort of unconsciously reach for one, but I'm like the 2-year-old with the lovey. You don't get in the car without the little stuffed dinosaur, and I don't walk around in a lot of places unless I have a pen in my pocket to grab if I need it.
That's awesome. But I love that. And that was actually another takeaway from the book. It sounds like your exploration of your senses really helped you gain some new and important self-awarenesses. And I'm sure that this is very different for different people, but like recognizing what kinds of sensory experiences energized you and which ones would soothe you. And then with that knowledge, being able to deliberately employ those things in order to manage your mood, manage your energy levels.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the quickest, easiest ways that people can intervene in mood is through music. And so now I created an audio apothecary of the songs because I talked about how I'm a song lover, but a lot of the songs that I love kind of put me in a melancholy, thoughtful mood, which I enjoy sometimes. But then sometimes, you want to have you want to like bring up your energy and your cheer. So I made a separate playlist for that so that if I wanted to intervene in my mood that way. Something wonderful that I learned because I am a sleep zealot. I really, really believe in the power of sleep and I need a lot of sleep myself. What I found is that I have a couple podcasts that I listen to. I highly recommend In Our Time, for instance, the BBC podcast, where if I can't sleep, I will listen to that podcast and I'll turn it to like 30 minutes. So it will turn off after 30 minutes. So it doesn't run through the night. But what I find is if you're a person who's like, has kind of racing thoughts or like who will start kind of like thinking about something that keeps you awake, like rewriting a paragraph or like thinking about, okay, well, what am I going to put in that article? And I start thinking and your thinking wakes you up. And I'm like, I don't want to be awake. It's the middle of the night. So listening to a podcast is enough to hold my attention so that I'm not woken up by my own thoughts, but it's not so engaging and suspenseful that I'm on the edge of on the edge of the bed waiting to hear what comes next. And of course, I know if I fall asleep, I can listen, I just rewind it. And what I find is that I go to sleep far faster when I actually like take the trouble to start a podcast than if I just like lie there. And I've been astonished by how effective this is. And of course, there are some podcasts like Sleep With Me that are actually sleep podcasts. I find those so boring that then I start thinking about my own thoughts again. I need something that I'm actually listening to.
Yeah.
And then I drift off. So it's these little things where you're like, well, it's not such a big deal and it's not hard and it's not subtle, but I didn't really notice it. And I wasn't using it consciously as a tool to make my life better.
Yeah, exactly. It's so I do exactly the same thing with
Do
podcasts,
you?
falling asleep.
Do you?
I do.
Yeah.
I do. It's so funny. But I love what you said, like, just recognizing what helps you and then
Right.
being able to do it. And so just another thing that just struck me so much, and I think, maybe we can even kind of end with this idea is that, throughout the book, you mention a number of times about the fact that our senses fade with age. Our hearing fades, taste, smell, I was recently in Abiquiu, New Mexico, and went to the Georgia O'Keeffe Museum, which was so fun. But I didn't even realize this is that, even she went blind towards the end of her life. And, you talk about touch certainly being the first reality, and I think our final reality, but just this recognition that our senses can and typically will fade over time somehow made all of these experiences that are so easy to overlook seem that much more precious, and kind of felt like a full circle, back to the original story, like having pink eye and talking with your doctor about, like, you might not be able to see at some point in your life. And like, there's just something about that recognition that certainly made me feel more motivated to, like, be here now. Was that your takeaway?
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, you can have a happy, fulfilling life if you lose,
Yes,
your senses,
absolutely.
but you don't want to look back with regret and think, well, why didn't I visit the desert when I had the chance? Why didn't I look around me when I had the chance? Why didn't I take advantage of the opportunities? Right. And then back to that point, I think sometimes it's thinking about possible loss that helps us to appreciate what we have. And so I think that recognition, it's true. And it's also something that can help us to be more mindful in the present.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, this has been such a wonderful conversation. And again, I loved your book so much. I would encourage everyone to read it. It was interesting. It is also helpful and really inspiring. And there was actually one passage at the end that I thought was so beautiful. Would you mind if I took a moment to just share this with our
Oh, sure. No, I'm
listeners?
so I'm so curious about what you chose.
Yeah.
No, I would love to hear that.
Well, it was actually about the orange traffic cone. The orange
Mhm.
traffic cone. You wrote about being on a walk with your dog and how you happened to glance at this orange traffic cone. I mean, there we all see them all the time, right? But there was this moment where you really saw it. You said this it was an orange shape glowing against the gray blue of the asphalt, as if lit from within. And then you go on to say that once in a while, in the midst of an ordinary day, an object or an action will take on this transcendent meaning. Can you tell us more about what that experience was like for you?
It's hard to put it into words because it is true that in my life, there have been a handful of times where I truly felt like divine forces had come busting down out of the sky and had somehow become embodied. I've been in conversations where I just felt like the air shook. And what's funny is it's a long other story, but I was in conversation with 2 other people, and then, like, years later, I was like, "Do you remember that really short, forgettable conversation?" And they were both like, "Oh, I 100% remember it," because it was so startling. And the thing about this cone, it was just like all of a sudden, I felt like I was outside of the cave and seeing some kind of platonic ideal of form, but in a joyful way, not in a serious way, but it just kind of like the joyful embodiment of geometry or creation, because a cone, it feels man-made, but it also feels natural, like sea glass, and the colors, it just was glowing, the combination was like nothing I'd ever seen. It was as beautiful as a Japanese kimono. I and then it passed. The moment kind of sprang into my awareness, and then everything became ordinary again. It was a beautiful moment. It was one of the most meaningful moments in my life, and all I was doing was standing on a street corner looking at a traffic cone, but I will never forget it.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us. And I think it's just this I love how empowering the idea is, how accessible it is, because all of these things are all around us all the time, but it's just tuning into it and really just being in the world and seeing and appreciating the beauty and just the joy that comes with it is available to all of us. And your book is just such an inspiring reminder to be here, to notice, to see, and to experience that.
Well, thank you so much. I think you're like my ideal reader because that's exactly what I
Oh,
wanted to communicate. And as a writer, you always think, "Oh, well, am I communicating?" And it sounds
done.
like yeah, it sounds like you
Yeah.
got from the book what I really wanted to convey. So you've made me very happy as such a reader.
Well, thank you so much. I enjoyed the book, and thank you for coming in and sharing your experiences and your book with our listeners today. And so, for people who would like to learn more about you and your work and buy this amazing book, how would they do that?
Well, if you go to my website, gretchenrubin.com, you can find it's a whole hub of you can read articles that I've written. You can read up about my books and pre-order it or order it, learn more about it. My 4 tendencies personality framework quiz that a lot of people really loved. You can find that on the website. I also have a podcast myself, Happier with Gretchen Rubin, where every week with my sister Elizabeth Kraft, who's a Hollywood showrunner, we talk about ideas about how to be happier, healthier, more productive, and more creative in our own lives. And I have a weekly newsletter, 5 Things Making Me Happy, which is exactly that, where I write about 5 things making me happy. And I'm all over social media at Gretchen Rubin. And I love to engage with people with insights and observations and questions and resources. We can all learn from each other. So I love it when people get in touch.
Excellent. Well, I will be sure to follow and subscribe to your newsletter. And when this was just wonderful. So thank you again so much for taking the time to speak with us today. This was great.
Thank you.
Wow. Fantastic conversation. Fantastic book. I hope that you guys got as much out of it as I did. I thought that was fantastic talking with Gretchen. And thanks for listening. It's always such a pleasure to be here with you. You know, as I was reading this book and sort of reflecting about my own favorite experiences, one of them is coming and talking to you and making podcasts for you. I get such genuine pleasure out of doing this with you and for you. And so keep in touch with me if there are things that you want to hear about, questions that you have, comments, reactions. You know, we're co-creating this together, so I'd love to hear all about it. You can get in touch with me at growingself.com, track me down on Instagram at Dr. Lisa Marie Bobby. But either way, I'll be back in touch soon with another episode. And in the meantime, please enjoy more Brian Eno. I invite you to have your own sensory experience through sound and check out more of his work. Brian Eno, allsaints.bandcamp.com.